What up, and greetings! I'm back again with review number 10. That rhymed. Anyways, bringing you more cards from Whispers of the Old Gods. Since last time, there was 7 cards in total that came out from different sources. 4 of them are class cards, 3 of them are neutrals, 2 of which are legendaries. 1 of them is kind of meh, boring, and the other one is really cool, so I'll save that one for last. And because I can't wait to show it to you already, let's get started on the review right now. First card of today is this guy called Possessed Villager. It's a 1 mana 1/1 for warlocks, and when it dies, it summons a 1/1 Shadow Beast. Now, this Shadow Beast is not a demon like some people think, so there's no demon synergy within this card. It is somewhat a half a Haunted Creeper. Haunted Creeper is a free 4 worth of stats in 2 mana. This is just 2/2 worth of stats in 1 mana, so it's worse in stats, but that's why Haunted Creeper was completely broken, and it's good that it's leaving the standard meta. It is somewhat similar to Argent Squire in the sense that if you buff Argent Squire with an Abusive Sergeant, it only loses Divine Shield. This kills itself, but it brings back another 1/1, so it survives until the next turn. It is somewhat similar to Living Roots as well, in the sense that you are getting 2/2 worth of stats for only 1 mana. Living Roots, however, has a lot of benefit in that you can choose the other option to deal 2 damage in late game. That can be very good for you because you can finish your opponent, or you can deal 2 potentially more damage with Azure Drakes to a minion that you really need to kill that turn. So it's not, I don't think it's as great as Living Roots. And the benefit that it has, of course, that it stays through board clears. So things like Twisting Nether, things like Doomsayer, First Nova, you keep a 1/1, and it just generally survives a lot more, and it brings you that 1/1 that you can then use the next turn with something like Abusive Sergeant. So this card will probably see play where Abusive Sergeant is concerned. Is it as strong as something like a Flame Imp or a Voidwalker that have been staples in Zoo since the beginning? I'm not too sure, because Voidwalker is very strong, is a 1/3. It survives through both Possessed Villager and the 1/1 Shadow Beast that it summons, and you still have a 1/1 taunt. Flame Imp is very good in early game when you drop it on first turn, and when he attacks into your opponent once, you've already balanced out the damage that he dealt to you and to your opponent. As a warlock, you don't really mind about your own health, because you only start drawing on, say, turn 6 or turn 7, or you're hoping to start life tapping, so your health is usually alright because you are keeping the aggression up. This synergizes with cards like Cultmaster to draw you more cards. You can use it to draw 2 cards, whereas from other minions you would only draw 1. Is that too great in Warlock that already can draw with a 0 power? Probably not that great. And it is probably not a good card to summon with your Enzoth, because you might want to summon actual big guys that have got great death rattles, like one of the minions that we're gonna see later on. This just doesn't do much. Even when it dies again, it's only 2/2 worth of stats. With Enzoth, you want to really make sure that when you drop him, he's gonna resummon your big guys rather than this crap. I think it is slightly better than an Argent Squire, slightly better in some situations, and therefore I think it might get played in some variations of Zoo deck. It's like 50-50 in my opinion. Yeah, that's it. Second card of today is called Wisps of the Old Gods, and it's a 7 mana spell for druids. Yeah, almost as expensive as Tree of Life. You can choose one, like it's very typical of druids that they can usually choose one or the other effect, and you can either choose to fill up your entire board with 1/1 wisps, or you give the minions on your board +2/+2, so exactly like a Scenarios effect, where one of the options is to buff all your minions by +2/+2. That's, however, not the only effect that it has a lot of similarity in. You can take a look at something like Dark Whispers, a spell that was very widely played, and druids are going to be crying a lot about it leaving, the meta right now. So they, instead of getting 5 wisps for 6 mana, they're getting a better deal because they're getting 7 wisps for 7 mana. And all you can give your minions +2/+2, whereas Dark Whispers could only buff 1 minion for +5/+5. So potentially with this, you can buff your minions for +14/+14, and that's a much better deal than +5/+5. But joking aside, I think this card is super, super slow. In decks like Token Druid, where I think that it's meant to fit, I don't really think that a 7 mana card of this type is much relevant because, yeah, you can give your minions +2/+2, but you usually want to play more on that turn. You know, you want to play something like a Violet Teacher, and then Power of the Wild it, and then Soul of the Forest the entire board. This is like Power of the Wild on steroids because instead of +1/+1, it gives +2/+2 to your entire board. But it's 7 mana, and Power of the Wild is only 2 mana. So I think in decks like Token Druid, you know, lower cost spells work a lot better because in general you just want to play those crazy combos on one turn rather than play something for 7 and then what on the same turn. If you just take a look on this card and compare it to something like an Ancient of Lore, which one would you rather put in majority of Druid decks? Just, you know, just have a think about it. The 1/1s die to Fan of Knives, and a Swipe, and Explosive Trap, and Arcane Explosion, and Consecration, and Dread Infernal. And next card on our list is one of the 2 big neutral legendaries on today's list. Big legendary minions seem to be the theme for this expansion. We've seen a lot of 10 mana, 9 mana, you know, big guys. And this is no exception. He's called Soggoth the Slitherer. And he seems to me like a big boss among the faceless guys. Is the biggest minion so far that we've seen that cannot be targeted by spells or hero power. On top of that, it has a taunt. So for 9 mana, you're getting quite a good ability on top. And the fact that it is untargetable makes very, very big difference because you cannot use hard removal on it, and aggro decks are going to be struggling against this guy a lot because you cannot use something like a Hunter's Mark on this, and you have to just run a lot of minions into this. It will kill all of the minions with 5 attack, and it will greatly punish the aggro board unless you have spells that are not targeted, like something like a Deadly Shot or Sabotage or Twisting Nether with Doomsayer or stuff like that. You will always have to sacrifice a lot to get through this guy. And while it is a really annoying minion that some stuff can hide behind it, at 9 mana you would expect something like 11 health on it, I think, because, you know, you're giving your opponent the initiative and how he's gonna deal with this card, and he can always Power Overwhelming and play Abusive Sergeant to kill it, and it only really saves you from 9 damage. For 9 mana, you're hoping to not only destroy the opponent's board and not giving him the ability to react to a card, but also to possibly heal up on the same turn to do a bit more than just drop this guy and hope for the best. That's why I don't see this guy seeing too much play, and if he does see a lot of play, I'll just start playing my Black Knight again. Next card is one that was given to Dog by Blizzard to reveal. It actually brings a lot of nostalgia to me because I remember farming Swift Thistle to make this tea for my rogue. It was an item that replenished something like 20 energy, I think, and he could drink it on a 2-minute cooldown to just, you know, get that extra backstab in there. And it was really cool to have it because it was a potion or an item that not many people had and knew about. And I kind of took pride on maximizing my damage output at that time. Really cool thing that they're adding those type of things to Heartstone as a shout out to those past items and abilities in World of Warcraft. I really, really like that and appreciate Blizzard for doing that. Also, I'm kind of biased probably because, you know, my own memories and all that. Thistle Tea for 6 mana is a very, very slow card draw mechanic, which Rogue already has Sprint, which is for 7 mana, so it's even more costly, but it draws you 4 cards, whereas this draws you 3 cards, 2 of which are outside the game, which is good in those control matchups when you don't really want to get into fatigue wars. Bad thing about this card is that the first card determines what the other 2 copies are going to be, and you don't want to necessarily, you know, want to get 2 copies of that card. You want to draw into multiple options to play on your next turn. And if you think about playing this with something like a preparation, you're only really getting 1 extra card out of it because you spend the preparation and Thistle Tea to draw into 3 cards that are the same, and you cannot really influence as to what cards they might be. And as Dog mentioned, when you play the first card, if your opponent tracks your hand at all, he will know which other 2 spells or 2 cards you have on hand at the time because, you played 1 out of 3, and he's probably going to change his game plans depending on what card you've played from these 3. So it's very, very slow, and I don't see it being played even if Control Row comes up. So Thistle Tea, despite the awesomeness of it being added into Heartstone, don't have too high hopes for this card of being placed in a lot of standard decks. Next card is a 1/1 for 4 mana that when it dies, it summons a 5/5. So in total, you're getting a 6/6 for 4 mana, which is a really good deal. And it somewhat functions similar to Nerubian Egg, where the second minion is a lot stronger than the first one. So like in case of this, where you get a 5/5, in case of Nerubian Egg, you get a 4/4. That's why I think Nerubian Egg is slightly stronger, but it's going out of the standard, and Naxxramas cards were known for being extra powerful anyway, so I don't think that this card is necessarily bad. It dies to an Earthshock, and Earthshock might be quite a prominent card unless it gets changed in all Shaman decks, and they might be including Hex as well because of the dominance of big minions in Whispers of the Old God set. I think that this card is not too great because Nerubian Egg just came out really, really early, and no matter what you did, it was a very threatening minion because you could always Abusive Sergeant, you could Power Overwhelming. There was just so many triggers for it, Defender of Argus as well, that then it became a real problem. And not only it traded with another minion, but it also spawned the 4/4. Further to that, it was like a buffer against a board clear, because if someone used the board clear, you would still be left with that 4/4 Nerubian, whereas this one, someone can just ping and then board wipe, and what you're left with, nothing, you cannot ping 2 health. That's why it's slightly better than just having a 1/1. I can see this being used in more of a mid-range or control type of deck, rather than the Nerubian Egg that was usually used in aggro decks. This works pretty well with Enzov. Like I said, that there might be cards coming out in Whispers that synergize very well with Enzov. This is quite good because if 2 of these die during the game, you resummon them, you're getting 10/10 Faceless Destroyers worth of stats back into the game once again, and this might help you a lot. You can play an Unearth Raptor on this to get another Faceless Destroyer out of the Unearth Raptor, and the big disadvantage of this card is just that it's super slow and you have to play it. You can't attack with it the first turn, then you have to sacrifice it to get the 5/5 Faceless Destroyer. You probably want to do it on the first possible turn, then you have to wait for another turn until the Faceless Destroyer wants to attack, and your opponent will never ever kill this minion, and if it will be with something like an Earthshock. And then it will just cry your eyes out. You cannot possibly play this on turn 4 because you have to play something of a tempo play by that turn. So unless it's going to be a very control heavy type of deck, or you're going to be playing this with something like Volash or Enzov or Baron Rivendell in Wild, I don't see too much play in the future for this card in Standard. Cool tentacles you got there, bro, but maybe not cool enough. Second to last card is a pre-spell for 2 mana, similar to Confuse or Shadow Word Pain and all that good stuff. It's called Embrace the Shadows. Embrace the Shadow. I would put it somewhere in between a Shadow form and Alchemy Soul Priest, in that it's a spell that doesn't only change your hero power, but all your spells, 2 damaging ones as well, temporarily, only for that turn, whereas Alchemy does this for the entire time that he stays in play. And while this is in most cases better because with the Alchemy on board, usually you only get a free 1 out of it because you've already played it with a circle. But if it sticks on board, you can be pinging every single turn for 2 until the time when you decide to sack him into something else. Sometimes it can be slightly punishing because you only really want to clear the board and you don't want to keep the Alchemy there in case that you are playing versus something like a Face Hunter, for instance. With Embrace the Shadow, it really fits into an OTK type of priest deck where you're not always guaranteed to keep your Alchemies in your hand until you can do the combo, because you can sometimes play them just to deal with your opponent's board before you draw into all the pieces of your combo. And this can be really, really good because you can play this with like a Velen and double flash heal for 20 damage in one turn. You know, if you get a thick from Thorison on it, potentially for only 8 mana, so you still have 2 mana to do other stuff in. And I think that's really, really great. I like the OTK combo deck, and I think that it just needs a couple of more tools for it to be viable and a bit more consistent. And I think that this is one of the cards that could potentially make it viable. What will make it viable even more is that I heard some rumors that Aukenai could be getting nerfed. I don't know how much of a truth that is, because if you're nerfing a card like this, are you going to nerf something like a Violet Teacher, which is a very powerful free 5 minion that defines a lot of decks? The same way that Aukenai sort of defines Priest, but it's one of the few cards that are really truly great in Priest. And you have to put a lot of cards that are not that great just in order to make it work better. Final verdict: if Aukenai gets changed, likely to get played. If it doesn't get changed, not very likely to get played. But again, it's probably better than Confuse, which I still haven't seen a deck where it could actually work except for rank 17. Let's see. And as promised, I saved the coolest one for last. It's a card that Kibler revealed to us just yesterday. It's the new version of Deathwing. It's called Deathwing Dragonlord. This time, instead of destroying everything when it comes into play, including your entire hand, this time when it dies and leaves play, it summons all dragons that you are holding at the time into play. Very, very strong and powerful minion. I'm actually quite surprised because it's one of the stronger ones. It is extremely slow, but there's a lot of extremely slow cards in the set, including the Old Gods, and we have to see for all the nerfs to see how good or bad these might become. This being a death rattle is very, very threatening, and it will definitely draw a silence if your opponent has one. But then it's still a 12/12, so the only thing that really deals with this is a hard removal. It's a minion that you don't really want to kill, like a Void Caller, because you don't know how much stuff it can come out of it. There might be nothing, or there might be like 7 dragons that will totally destroy you. And you have to somehow deal with it, because it's a 12/12, so you cannot just put taunts in its place every turn, and eventually it will die. It's pretty hard to kill. Something like a Sylvanas, you know, sometimes you have to attack with it for 2 or 3 turns if you're playing against an aggro to get it killed. And in those situations, it's not that great, because you might be wanting to summon a lot of dragons from your hand that you haven't played until that point, which is not that likely because this card is 10 mana. And then there might be some dragons that you really want to keep in your hand the moment when this is dying, because you're afraid of something like a Brawl or a Twisting Nether or a Doomsayer or stuff like that. So this card might be overextending you in a similar way that Varian was overextending you. It's great to have a decent board advantage, but it can be super punishing against some classes. And if you put all of your dragons on board at the same time, and then they get all destroyed, and you're left with no threats, what do you do exactly? So while this version of Deathwing, I believe, is more playable than the original version, it is super, super slow. Despite the fact that it's super, super cool. I'm not saying it isn't, yeah. But what cards, what dragons would you be most likely drawing out of this? Except for cards like Chilmo. Cards like Twilight Guardians don't even get taunt in order to sort of save you from the outcoming damage. And I don't know what you guys think. Let me know in the comment section below. What are your ideas about the Deathwing and what possible synergies he could be bringing into play? I might be missing something out. And that's it. That was the last card. Thank you so much for watching, guys. Again, please give this video a thumbs up, show it to your friends, share it, do whatever, because it really helps me out. Subscribe for more Heartstone and other content coming out in the near future. And until I see you guys next time with more cards, bye! Take care!